Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On here at allpointstv.com. We are delighted here at the studio for two reasons today. We're glad that you're out there, and you can tune us in, of course, at your convenience. I'm happy about that. But I'm also happy about the fact that today, if I'm not mistaken, the return of Satura's Black History Corner that comes on the day at 3:30. And I'm very excited about that because they've been gone for a while because of death in Miss Catherine Hunter Williams' family, but she's healing. And as that begins to continue down that particular path, she'll be back in the studio, I understand, this afternoon, and I certainly will be tuning a program in. I run back home every day once my program tapes, and I make sure I tune it in live. So I will be tuning the program in, and I understand they are coming into the studio today, so I'm very happy to see that development. Well, we have some. I have some. I have some good news and some bad news. I was telling you last week I took my friend out. You know, we have these friendly bets, but it's very competitive. But if I keep losing, I'm not so sure I'm going to feel as competitive. I betted on the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight. And I lost that fight because I went with my heart and not my head. I knew that Mayweather was a superior boxer, but I just had the impression that if you're charging us $100 to see the fight by the two best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, I thought what would happen is that he would come out and actually put on the show, feeling guilty about taking our money and then going into a shell like he normally does. Boy, was I mistaken. So anyway, that was a sleeper, and I ended up taking my friend down to Birmingham, Michigan. I get that mixed up with Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm from, but two different places. And I took him down to Birmingham because he didn't want to go to any place local, and because I'm beholden to satisfy the requirements of the debt. I mean, that's one thing we do. We do have that in common. We both believe in paying our debts off. But I didn't know at the time that I made this bet that he wanted to go down to Birmingham, Michigan, down to the Pancake House. And then once I got there was another $25 because the guy wanted a stack of pancakes and he wanted all the accoutrements that went along with it. Cups of coffee, maybe some orange juice, double meats. And so last night, anyway, the point is that last night I thought I was going to be 2 up. And when it went into overtime, I'm just knowing that given the fact they're working LeBron James to death on the court, he can't take any time off because of the number of players they have down on that team. So I'm thinking that he is not going to be able to survive going into another 5-minute overtime. They had overtime in the first game. And then they had another overtime. I think this is the first time that's happened, by the way, where you've had two overtime games in a row. And I don't know if it's happened even in a series like that. But that's how evenly matched they have been over the last 2 games. I don't think it's going to be evenly matched over the series, though, because I've never seen a player, as great as LeBron is, I've never seen a player that can have that burden placed on his shoulders for a whole series, particularly if they go 7 games. And I hope it doesn't go 7 games because then I'm in trouble again. But I thought I was going to be able to come here celebrating the fact that we're 2 up and I'm going to be able to have a breakfast finally on this guy. Because if I keep losing, I'm going to have to give this guy on my Social Security a card or maybe file for my income tax return, put him on there as a dependent. Because this is not working. But anyway, we're here and we're back, and we would have been a lot more exciting and a lot more excited if I had come in with a 2-0 record, knowing then we only got 2 more games to win before I'm over the hump and I can now get a breakfast on this guy. But that is not. I think fate wants to just hold off and wanted me to come to the studio a little bit depressed, but not so depressed I can't do the program. Okay. I want you to read my post today. I've been doing some out-of-the-box posting on Facebook, and we're getting a lot of people that are doing hits on the post that I'm doing, and I also go on Facebook and read a lot of the other posts. And maybe I'm spending too much time doing it because I need to be doing a lot more reading of my books. And that's something that's got to be done because you fall into a trap because you're able to communicate. One thing that Facebook does, it gives you an outlet into the world, unlike television and radio, where they make you believe you can interact with those mediums by writing to the programs, and they read your letter over the air, and you think that is interactive, but it's not really interactive in the same way that Facebook is interactive. And you have people that post, and you post, and they're in your chat room, and you're chatting back and forth, and that can become quite a time-consuming activity, and you try not to spend too much time in it because of other things that have to be done, other tasks got to be taken care of. And you fall into a trap by sitting there sometimes in the comfort of the office or in my computer room where some of my books are, and you get into a comfort zone of being in there because you got your books there, you can do your reading, and then there's the network, you can invite the world into your space, and that can be problematical at some point. So I've got to get away from that for a while and just kind of maybe, I don't mean get away from it, but to put certain time around when I'll be doing that and being involved in some other things. And I think I'll handle it that way. It doesn't take that long for me to post, but I like to read other people's comments, and I like to read what they have thought important and what they post. So I'm not just looking at what is on my wall, I'm looking at other walls or people I have a lot of respect for, and I go in and see what they have posted because I know they're going to put something on their walls that is serious, and I want to see what they think were the issues of the day that were of some interest, and I read it for that purpose. I want to find out, before I get into what I want to talk about today, I do want to find out who this person is, Wayne Dupree, which was on one of the walls, and I haven't come across that name. I did look it up once. Someone made me aware of this young man, and I went on his wall and read some things that were on his post. I guess he's a radio host. I don't know how is it radio, or is it on the podcast? Is it on a computer program or what? But I was really impressed with some of the comments he made, and I was impressed because there are not very many of these out-of-the-box thinkers that would be willing to come forward in the public and take the heat that comes with identifying yourself as not being part of the herd. And basically, the requirement is that you stay in the box and that you don't do any out-of-the-box thinking. And I like to think out of the box because I'm not a person like to parrot the ideas of others, like to create my own ideas. And I try to go around some of the things that have been said and take that and then try to expand upon it so I can give my little 2 cents worth of information to add to it. And when you do that, you invite a lot of persons into your space that are going to be critical of what you're doing, because they're used to having people in lockstep agreement, particularly in the black community, where there's almost a requirement, an informal requirement, that everybody walk and chew bubble gum at the same time, and that you dance to the same tune. And I'm not about that, and I'm not about to do it. And when I find someone else is broken out of that straitjacket and is willing to put themselves on the line for ideas that they come up with and being independent thinkers, then I have to admire that. And I didn't know who this person was, but somebody put it on their wall, and I said, wow, I got to find who this person is. And I have been impressed. I'm going to be trying to contact Wayne Dupree. If you're out there, I'm really interested in talking to you, because you have something that shows that you have something to say of substance, and that you're a person of courage. And it takes a lot of character to do what you're doing based upon what you're saying on your posts and what you apparently are saying in your radio commentary. From what I've been able to gather at this point, I will be looking into it even further as we go down the line. but it's something to be said about a person that shows the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that you've shown. And I have to say to you that I really have a lot of respect for you. And we'll see what kind of contact we'll have in the future, because I will be trying to make some contact, and maybe we can have you on this program at some point, and we'll see how that plays out. That's the Facebook part. What I want to do basically today is talk a little bit about the Constitution, which I can't talk about enough, because I think we're in a crisis in this country, and the crisis is brought about because we have overthrown the Constitution in this country. This is no longer a document that applies in terms of the rule of law in the United States, and we've got to get back underneath, get the government back underneath the Constitution of the United States, or then all things that this country has stood for in the past, all of its traditions, will be lost. And we've got to get back to some fundamental undergrounding, some underpinnings of this nation, which is the grounding point of our country, and that is, what does the rule of law in this country require? And those requirements are in the Constitution of the United States. So I brought this document, which is put out by the Heritage Foundation, and it has in it the two major documents of the United States. It has the Declaration of Independence in it, and I don't know if we understand that. And even less so, probably, the Constitution of the United States and what it requires. But I would beseech you to get a copy of this, carry it around, and every once in a while, open it up and read some part of it. You don't have to read it all the same day. Read some part of it, and then the next day, pick up where you left off and read some more of it until you get through it. And I don't know how long it'll take you, but it won't take you forever. And just be familiar with, and I don't even think we're talking about being familiar with all of the Constitution in all of its amendments. I'm talking about being aware of the original Constitution, which was 7 articles, and then the 10 amendments, which make up the Bill of Rights, to be aware of that part of it, because that is the part in which the framers were involved in, because they were the ones that had drawn up the document to create the government, a stronger federal government that had been created under the Articles of Confederation. And they came back to revisit that, because what they had set up under the Articles was not working in the way in which they thought it would work. They had too badly weakened the central government and kept it inoperative, and they had to come back behind their own work and do something to remedy that situation, and did a marvelous job of doing that. And what they did was to write 7 articles and creating a new document. And in doing so, you see what their intent was by the fact that what they did was to try to do, through empowering the federal government, what they had done under the Articles, where they had weakened the federal government, but kept it so weakened that it was unable to respond to national crises. So they came back behind themselves and they tried to strengthen the federal government without allowing it to go out of control. And that's why you have the separation of powers in the Constitution, and you have the vertical disaggregation of power on the federal level and the state level, and then they have the enumeration of powers in Article 1, Section 8, and then they prescribe that in Amendment 10, when they put the Bill of Rights into place in 1791, they put in there that any rights that were not, any powers that delegated, meaning enumerated in the Constitution to the federal government, those rights, therefore, those privileges will reside in the states and to the people therein. That's how much they were trying to keep the federal government under under duress and under control. And they did a marvelous job. It lasted for a long time, but as happens, is that more and more as you go down the line, more and more of the power is taken by the central government, and in its place, what you have is a subsiding of the strictures that were put in place. And now we have come to a very dark place in our history, and we've got to understand where we are at this point in time, because none of this is irreversible. But we've got to get a handle on what is happening in the country so we can begin to understand what we need to do to remedy the situation. And there are some people out there, by the way, in the networks that are doing excellent work. I think a program that people should pay attention to is Mark Levine's program. This man is a constitutional scholar of the first order. And what Mark Levine does, I don't know if he comes on the same time I don't know if his program is taped and they do some of it live and they do some of it late. I don't know how they do that. I know it comes on here from 6 o'clock to 9, 5 days a week. And I try to pay attention to that program because I think Mark Levine is a patriot, and he really is trying to restore constitutional order in this country. And his book, called the Freedom Amendments, and his recommendations in terms of how to bring about a refitting of the country around the constitutional mandates is primary. And I think some of the ideas that he has in there, quite frankly, were some of the things I had put on Facebook 2 years ago. And after I had put that out there, 6 months later, Mark Levine puts his book out there. I'm not saying he plagiarized what I wrote. I wouldn't make that particular statement, but I am saying that I was out there first with the need to use Article 5 of the Constitution that allows for the convention to be called, and also sets up the amendment process in Article 5. And I called for something that's never been done before, and that was I called for the convening of a constitutional convention, which is also prescribed in Article 5, as a way of bringing the powers that be back to heal underneath the umbrella of the rule of law, which we have lost that. And I was very glad to see Mark Levine pick up on the same theme. Not that he got the theme necessarily from me, but I do say that it was 6 months later when his book came out. And so I don't know what that means, other than the fact that there's a chronology that's in place in terms of the two of us actually having looked at that as prescription for resolving the problem and applying the right kind of medicine on the problem that we're now facing. But that is still a fact, and you can see that on Facebook in terms of when I posted that, find out when Mark Levine's book was published, and then look at the posting, and you'll see that there's a 6-month difference between the two. Anyway, I have a lot of respect for him. And I do think that he has done a wonderful job, is doing a good job in terms of bringing us back to the founders, because there is no salvation for this country if we lose sight of what their will was and what their vision was in terms of putting these things in place. So I would like you to, I think all citizens must arm themselves with the Word. And the Word is, in this case, the Word is with the framers. And that is the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and in the Constitution, which was not a revision of the Articles of Confederation. It was a complete throwing out of the Articles of Confederation and bringing into its place a whole new document. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That is those of us who are here now and those who will come, after us. In my post this morning, one of my former students, who's now a teacher in California, one of the I remember him so well, and this is a number of years ago, and he's still out there, and he's still honorable as he was when he was a student in when I had him in 11th grade. And now he's a full-fledged instructor with a lot of concern for the country and a patriot. And he said this morning in my post that he was worried about the nation for the 18. That's a lot of. He has 18 grandchildren. Congratulations. And he says very concerned about the state of affairs based upon the grandchildren who are going to at one point inherit this country, and what would it look like when they come up and they are now the ones that are carrying the banner for their children. And I knew what he was talking about, and I told him that what he's concerned about for his grandchildren is much more the case in Europe, where that which they're concerned about is unlike what we're concerned about. What we're concerned about is that which is maybe will be around the corner, but what they're concerned about in Europe is that which is now on Main Street. Because what Europe is facing is what Europe is dealing with is that which is now current in Europe. And that cause may well be a lost cause, given what I've been reading in some of the books, one of which is Mark Stein's book called America Alone, The End of the World as We Know It. And that book needs to be read, because those things that he's describing in Europe, those things are now appearing on the land here. And we are not outside of being in peril. You can be in peril here too. And that is something that is very much a concern that he had, and anyone paying attention would also have that same concern. One of the persons said, as a matter of fact, that they didn't know how we could get the country back. And my statement was that that we may not be able to do it, but it's immoral for us not to try. And I know that there are people that have a sword, but we have a pen. And we'll see how that plays out. But we have a weapon, and the weapon we have is a pen, and we have information we can impart, and we refuse to do it, then that makes us immoral and complicit in what is taking place. And I want to do the best I can to fight the best fight I can fight in terms of the weapons that I have. And I do have some information. I do have a way to articulate my ideas in writing. And that's the way in which I have chosen to stake out the claims that I think that I can make. And the 2 or 3, 4 or 5 that gather around to read those comments, then that is 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that can carry the banner and do what they have to do. But we have to do something. And we can't just go around with our hands up in the air surrendering because we recognize how overwhelming this situation can be. And I'm not overwhelmed by it. I get up every day excited. And and I have a lot of friends. They never see me down. They want to figure out, why is this guy... And I had students like that. When I was teaching in public school, I had one, I never forget her, one of my students said in my class, I didn't know why she was sitting in there every hour in my classroom. And I know her name, I can call her name out right now, but that was a long time ago when she sat in every class the whole day. And once she sat in my class the whole day, she went out and she said, I don't care what nobody says, Mr. Moss is on something. Because there's nowhere in the world he can be up like that all day. And I was on something. I was on my books. I was high on what I knew. And I would go in the classroom, and an hour wasn't enough time, quite frankly, because I had read, I might have read a book between the class the day before and the next day, because I was sitting in a chair and I'd read the book all day, and by the time I went back in the classroom, I had, another volume of information. And so sometimes the bell would sound and students are still sitting there, nobody has moved, and I have to tell them, you can leave, because they would just still be sitting there. I mean, that was kind of thing that would happen sometimes. It wouldn't happen every day, but it happened a lot of days. And then I had certain things I would do dramatically and things like that. When I was in my younger days, I had a lot of energy. But I'm always trying to do something that would bring about some enlightenment, and that's what I enjoy doing. I think I was born to do some of that, and I can't see not doing it. As long as there's coherence, and I wake up in my quote-unquote right mind. John said last week there will be some that may contest that. What is your right mind? But in the mind that I think is right in terms of the one I was born with, I certainly haven't vacated the premises yet. When you become senile, you don't have any choice in the matter, and I have not yet reached that level where you go into Alzheimer's and you are going through another stage. I'm not there yet, so just bear with me. And if I get there, I won't be in public. I'll do what a lot of people do at that point, and that is begin to retire into another arena, and then I'll just be people around me that I'll be talking to, maybe in some ward somewhere. But seriously, what I'm getting at here is that we have got to pay attention more so than what's going on, because we have an obligation morally to speak to those who are in power and let them know at least that we're paying attention and that we don't appreciate all the things that are going on in our name, because this is not what the framers intended. Now, there are some people out there who on a university level, who I think Ayn Rand was speaking particularly to in a book called The New Intellectuals. I think she was speaking directly to the intelligentsia today, whom Rand in that book saw them as being immoral, because she felt that they should be the ones that are the guides of the society who have abdicated their responsibilities. And I certainly see that in terms of at the university level, where they've abdicated their moral responsibilities, and many of them are now caught up in a network of going along to get along, and grants are part of it, the salaries are a part of it, getting tenure is part of it. All these things are part of it, but the intelligentsia was really thought to have been those that would be in the forefront of being the guides of the society, and if that were the ideas, if that was the idea behind their coming out of what really was a capitalist system, because there was no intelligentsia that was able to sit on the sideline and have a system in place which took care of their primary and primordial needs, and then could actually get paid for being involved in what some call the life of the mind, where you are just really being paid to think, with think tanks and things like that. And that was the idea, was that they would be in the forefront of being able to guide the society, so that the imperatives of that the needs of that society would not be left to chance. There will be a lot of planning that goes on, so that we are going into higher levels of a higher quality of life, without it having to do with anything that borders upon the kind of illegality we see in place right now. But when I see somebody saying, as Jonathan Turley said, and he's a constitutional scholar, I think he's at American University, and he came out in one of the testimony. I think he testified before, was it the Senate? I think it was the Senate he was testifying before, and he said that we had a constitutional tipping point in this country. You cannot be sincere and say that. We're not at a constitutional tipping point. We've crossed that bridge. The nation is now at the tipping point. We passed the constitutional tipping point. We've overthrown the Constitution in this country. And that's what Thomas De Lorenzo is trying to say in his book called Who Killed the Constitution, in a book that should be read, because we've now passed the tipping point of the Constitution. This document has been overthrown. And very little of what is required in here is followed. Now, there are some things in here I don't think that dare violate, but in terms of Article 2, Section 4, which calls for the impeachment of those that are not beholden to following this document, if that were to be applied, you would have impeachments going on without fail, because Article 2, Section 4 says the president, because we don't have kings in this country, the president, the vice president, and all civil officers being all the persons that are in these federal posts, Secretary of State, other cabinet members. I'm not so sure that applies to the czars, because they weren't installed in the first place. And I don't know what we're doing with czars in this country. But that's an appointment that doesn't go through the regular process. And really, these czars are unconstitutional. But that's one way of getting around the accountability factor, because if they're not beholden to any kind of nomination process through which you go through the requirements of the Constitution, where you nominate and then they have to be confirmed by the Senate. If you can go around that, then you go around the accountability that's built into it based upon the constitutional standard. But we have czars in this country, and why would that be the case? Why do we have czars in the United States? Hold on, I'll get to that, because I want to deal with that for at least a few seconds in terms of how that happened and what that is about. But we have got to understand the requirements of government, what was intended for government to do. And in Article 2, Section 4, which says the president and vice president, we know who those officers are, and it says and all civil officers, the Supreme Court, cabinet members, those persons are federal judges, those are civil officers of the United States. Now, it doesn't apply to the state offices, but they have in their constitution something that mimics the language in Article 2, Section 4. So the president, vice president, all civil officers of the United States shall be, and shall is the strongest language you can use in terms of saying what ought to happen. It doesn't say ought to be, should be, shall be. Shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason. And what were the framers doing putting treason in the Constitution if they didn't think that that was possible by those who have been sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States? What is it doing there? If they thought that a person could be taken at their word, they would never put that in there. Treason, bribery in Washington, D.C. Go read the book called How Capitalism Saved America. And read that book, particularly out of the first part of the book, and then maybe, I think, chapter 13 of the book, and see what you think about the issue of bribery. And I read a piece just the other day on De Lorenzo did a piece on Abraham Lincoln, and his comment was very troubling. He went into some other things about where we are now with the government. What he said there was that in many ways, the government we have now is more tyrannical than it is in China. And this is no lightweight thinker. This man works at Loyola University, and that Jesuit school is no plaything. That's a top-notch institute of learning, and he's also affiliated with the Mises Institute, which is another scholarly domain. This is no lightweight person, and when he says anything, you have to pay attention to it because of the stature of his scholarship. He's an out-of-the-box thinker also. Anybody that wants to read anything of out-of-the-box thinkers, Thomas De Lorenzo is one of them. And then I'll tell you another one that he quotes a lot, and that is another person in the course of human events, a book written by Charles Adams. And Charles Adams's books, particularly books like those Dirty Rotten Taxes and other books he's written on taxation, history of taxation in the world, these are primary sources that need to be read. Then you can understand government a lot better. And I'll tell you something, once you get your eyes open, very little that goes on really passes you. You can almost analyze anything that takes place because you have the background in terms of your research that helps you to understand the present world. Without that research and without some background in terms of reading history, almost everything gets past you. But if you were going to apply the standards of Article 2, Section 4, you would be actually impeaching federal office holders on a regular basis because the rule of law would then be put back in place, and then you would be able to bring these persons to heel based upon the rule of law and the Constitution being applied and applicable in all these circumstances where there's a violation of the rule of law that they took an oath to uphold, because all of them have to take an oath of fealty to the Constitution in order to be inaugurated. All members of Congress take that oath of office on the 3rd of January, and that's the going rate.
What do you think caused the this slacking off and basically the emphasis on they're not willing to actually follow the Constitution? I mean, it seems like it was somewhere down the road somebody decided we can no longer, and this is like, it's just too arbitrary. I could just imagine people rolling their eyes and somebody brought up a point of constitutionality, oh boy, that old document. That's what it seems like it's coming across as. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a person who believes it was divinely inspired or whatever. I don't. I think it was a well thought out document. Mm-hmm. It was considered. Now it's got probably deficiencies by some people's standards who want to go beyond what that scope was allowed, that parameters that they allowed. But it seems like now there's just almost like a animosity if you bring up points of constitutionality. Yet at the same time, when they try to expand for things that they want, like to expand for social consciousness, they'll try to stretch the Bill of Rights to a point that it's like that nobody could ever conceive that it was going to go that direction. So I mean, it's like, I really sound like some conservatives try to say that the right to privacy is never enshrined in it because that word's never used, which I have take issue with that. I do believe you have a right to be, to have some assurance of privacy, and if they want to violate that, they have to show a due, proper cause, and a probable cause rather, and then get a warrant to search it and get your papers and stuff from you. But I mean. So, I mean, nowadays, that whole thing, the constitutionality, it's like basically people roll their eyes when you bring it up. I mean, yeah. I've seen both sides, when they want to get away, they're hell-bent on doing something, they roll their eyes when you bring that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is that response that you get, and I've gotten that a lot myself, and I've gotten past being bothered by it. I'm going to have to speak the truth, and I know that the truth is not popular. It has always had to fight its way into the world, which is what Godfrey Higgins says in his book called The Anacalypsis, written in 1837, is that the truth has never been popular in the world. Truth has always had to fight its way into the world. And that's just the going rate. Now, in terms of the document being divinely inspired, no, it's not divinely inspired. It's inspired by their own experiences. If it had been divinely inspired, they would never have drawn up the Articles of Confederation to start out with, but having that document in place and then seeing the frailties of the document and the fault that it had, it wasn't able to do the things they thought it would be able to do. And when they saw that the intended purpose of it was not served. That was pointed out in 1786 with the Shays Rebellion that occurred in that year, when they saw that it had handicapped the federal government to the point it could not respond to national crises. Then they had to come back and then admit they had made some errors in their formation of the original document to govern the country, and they went with something else in its place. They tried, first of all, to come to. They had really been sent to Philadelphia. They had gone to Annapolis the year before, but didn't have a quorum, so they had to convene another meeting, and this one was held in Philadelphia. And they came to first of all, they went there with having been charged to go there and to revise the Articles of Confederation. But a light bulb got turned on while they were there, and that light bulb was that these 13 articles in the Articles of Confederation were so flawed that revision was not the answer. A new document was the answer, and that's why they went beyond the commission that they had been sent there for, and went above the commission and drew up a whole new document, and did it behind closed doors, by the way. I mean, if you left some papers out to show what you were doing behind those closed doors, they went and grabbed those papers because no one was supposed to read what they were doing, because they didn't want to have anybody in on what was taking place until the final plan was in place. In other words, we have to create something here different than what we have, and if the people find out what it is before it is completed and can't see the whole picture, they will object to it and kill it. It'll be DOB, dead on DOA, dead on arrival. So they had to kind of hide. They went throwing stones. They were hiding their hands because they knew that this was something that was unintended. But this was an unintended consequence that had a very good result. But they understood what they were dealing with, though, and that's why they tried to do in the Constitution what the framers had originally tried to do in the Articles, which was chain government down. But you can't weaken it so that it cannot respond though, to national crises. And that's what the Shays Rebellion had shown, that we have to balance out. Here's the balancing act right here. You have to balance out the requirements of government from the requirements of limiting the impact that people with power will import into the process because of the frailties of human nature. How do you then put a government in place that on the one hand empowers government, at the same time takes some power, make sure it doesn't go beyond the limits that are put in place, because power is addictive. I mean, it's not power that's addictive. I don't mean to say it in that sense. I mean, when I say power is addictive, I don't mean power. See, I'm not talking about what Lord Acton said. I think Lord Acton was wrong. Lord Acton said power tends to corrupt, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. I don't agree with that. I wrote about it when I was in undergrad school, and I write a different papers I'm writing on it now. I don't agree with Lord Acton. I think power is just like your gun. You put it on, and you put a weapon. You put a gun in the room, it doesn't go off on its own. There are no tendencies in the gun. The gun, there are no tendencies the gun have as a gun itself. It certainly has certain things built into it. It operates a certain way, but it has to have a triggering mechanism, a person that will operate the mechanism in order for it to do what it does. It does not do it on its own. And power is the same way. There's power to be used, but it is a human factor that comes into it that makes it whatever it will be. And I have not seen any examples. I'm still doing research on it, but I have not seen virtue. I have not seen it. I have not seen virtue and power being used. I don't see, and that's the point I think Milton Friedman was raising when he said, when he raised the question of where are these philosopher kings that Plato wrote about in the Republic? Well, they're not here. They're not in Congress. And so, no, the document is not it's not divinely inspired. These are the experiences. They tried to limit the federal government because of their experiences with King George III. And they tried to limited not only because they feared what would happen in the future, but they feared their own human weaknesses. These prohibitions placed in that document, and all the first articles in the Constitution all those articles are nothing other than shackles placed upon government. That's why Dr. Walter Williams says, this great professor at Georgetown University.
George Mason University.
George Mason University,
Yeah.
That's right. George Mason, I get Georgetown and George Mason University mixed up. Georgetown has the good basketball team. That's what they're noted for. Yeah, George Mason University. And he makes a very a number of strong points. And one of them is that if you have died and you wake up, and in the place that you ended up with, you find the Constitution there being used in that place, then he said you will know that when you deceased, that the elevator took you down. Because the only reason you have to have a document like that in a place that is imperfect. And that's what the framers, they understood that. And that's why they put the document in place. All it is, if you read the first 7 articles, you understand the framers. You can get into, and you can even see their mindset. What they intended to do was put so many shackles upon government, there was just no way they could easily break from underneath this document, because there were so many different ways in which they tied the powers down. The enumerated powers and listed it and itemized in Article 1, Section 8, put 18 clauses there. Made a mistake, by the way. If it was divinely inspired, it would not have been this mistake they put in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18 is what allowed them to expand upon that which they tried to limit, because that's a necessary and proper clause. And when those jokers, those politicians took that clause and said, well, this is necessary and this is proper, and they began to expand the power.
Or look at Jefferson. I mean, he was always for limited government. When he was a president, he actually made a purchase of land that really stretched that power that he wanted to actually have a limit on. It stretched it to way beyond the breaking point.
1803. That was never, and he was unconstitutionally, he wasn't at the convention. So that may be his out. He wasn't. I mean, he was in France at that time, although he had drawn up he had been the major writer, with some revisions brought in by the rest of the ones at the at the place where they drew up in Philadelphia, when they drew up the Declaration of Independence. But he wasn't there at the Constitutional Convention. He was in France at that time, and so that. I'm not excusing him. The Constitution was still drawn up, and it still was a rule of law, and he violated it by annexing what amounted to 9 states that were carved out of the Louisiana Purchase that was really acquired illegally by Thomas Jefferson in 1803. But France was in such a duress, and the deal was such that, it was a deal that Jefferson just could not refuse, because those guys are so much on what they were doing was sacrificing that which they felt they would lose anyway, and trying to hold on to that which they thought they'd be able to hold on to, which was the colony in Haiti. There was a much more lucrative entity for them, and they thought they're going to lose the territory here anyway. So they thought, since they got this problem over there in Haiti with Toussaint Louverture and Boukman and John Francois and Bielsa and some of the others that were revolutionaries down there in Haiti, 120 miles from Florida, they thought that they better hold on to this, and they're going to lose that anyway, so why don't we sell this and then pay for the cost of the war we're fighting in Haiti. They sold it for about 4 cents an acre. And Jefferson saw a bargain he could not refuse, even though it was prohibited by the Constitution. He went and did it anyway. But that's the framers for you, that they were also, they knew that they were not perfect themselves. And we see that in terms, Jefferson was the 3rd president. We see that in John Adams. John Adams was the one that had been originally assigned to write the Declaration of Independence. But knowing his own limits, as far as being able to write it, he knew Jefferson was a better writer than him, and Jefferson was a mock scholar. The framers, according to Ayn Rand, were this country's first intellectuals. And here's a bombshell she drops on us in that book called the new intellectuals, and so far our last intellectuals. You can't be an intellectual writing a book and then letting everything go on and you play no role in directing and being of some interest, having some interest in directing the country toward the common good. You can't abdicate that responsibility and call yourself an intellectual. You're a sellout. I mean, that's what that is. And all you people out there in this global warming thing, and you go along with that nonsense, and you're going along with it because it's about a grant and so on, you're not intellectual. You're a sellout.
Well, I agree with that. It's like basically, the whole thing about climate change. Okay, yeah, you put the impositions in our country, but the Chinese and the places they're developing, you don't really have an enforceability. They're not going to be willing to sign on anyway because they're not going to hamstring themselves. So you say the other people from not polluting, and that's good. That's good. I'm not going to knock that because that's a little bit less stuff out in the air. Okay, not knocking that. I'm an environmentalist by way, not like a wacko. I just believe that you shouldn't necessarily pollute everything. You should take limits on stuff, and you should prevent it from happening at all. But even if you do put these people on board and stuff like that, and say China does it, you still got all that stuff being belched out into the environment. It's still going to have its impact anyway. So basically, it's always on one side, but not the other. And another thing is too. See, you're right too. I mean, I would like to. There's nobody out there who's not disinterested. They don't advocate for something and not gain something from it. They're always gaining from it.
Yeah. Well, John, those persons that would sell their souls that way, you cannot count them as being intellectuals because intellectuals be the persons that will be in the forefront of trying to add to the quality of life. And I want to read something here. I'm going to read this before we get off the air because I want to read this for because I think it fits into our conversation here. This is written by one of the most quoted persons at the university level, and that's a person by the name of Howard Zinn. And if you're at the university, you cannot really get through the university, I don't think, today without having come across Howard Zinn's books because his books are the most noted works that are used in history departments throughout the United States. Let me read something that he says here that I think ties into this conversation. He's talking about objectivity. He says, why should we cherish objectivity as if ideas were innocent, as if they don't serve one interest or another? Surely we want to be objective if that means, listen to this carefully, if that means telling the truth as we see it. Not concealing information that may be embarrassing to our point of view. But we don't want to be objective if it means pretending that ideas don't play a part in the social struggle of our time, that we don't take sides in those struggles. So then what Howard Zinn is saying is that you want to be objective only if it serves a certain end. In other words, being objective is considered to be, in and of itself, a source of immorality, because if being objective does not serve the ends to which you seek, then being objective is immoral. That's quite profound, isn't it? That a person will take that stand. Indeed, it is impossible to be neutral. So that kind of explains why these scholars, John, are taking sides. You heard, I wish you would go online sometime, John, and get in touch with Ivan Sayet, who does a very good job on dealing with the liberal mind that gives some very good insights. You'll like what he has to say. Anyway, Howard Zinn is saying the following as well. He says, indeed, it is impossible to be neutral. In other words, you got to take sides. In a world already moving in certain directions, where wealth and power are already distributed in certain ways, neutrality means accepting the way things are now. It is a world of clashing interests, war against peace, nationalism against internationalism, equality against greed, and democracy against elitism. democracy against elitism. And it seems to me both impossible and undesirable to be neutral in those conflicts. And so, to be neutral, to be objective, is therefore immoral. In other words, and you see that playing out in our society right now. In other words, like for example, in the press. In the press, when they report the news, for example, of what goes on in places like Baltimore and Ferguson, the press is not objective because you see, by Howard Zinn's formula, to be objective is in fact to be biased. Because in being objective, you don't take the side of the person who is the underdog. In other words, to be neutral is immoral because it does not side with the person who is considered to be the one who is not in power. And so objectivity is seen as immoral. And when you begin to accept that as the way in which we organize and ordain society, then we have a real serious problem here. Because then you create a society like the one we're seeing right now, where you take from those who, we got 3 minutes now? We got 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I have to make sure that I'm not running over my time, because if I do that, John starts sawing his neck off. He can go back there and start doing that, and I want to make sure he gets dinner this evening. By the way, John, you're invited over. I'm barbecuing today.
Chicken, fish, what?
Ribs and chicken.
Oh, you know, Ronald Ray Robinson brought in some ribs when he came in Saturday. A bucket of ribs from a place out there on North Saginaw Street.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. This place was, I don't know the name of the place. I forget it now, but the second time he's brought them in. These things are amazing. So I don't know what the name of the group is, but North Saginaw here in Flint. Man,
yeah, I know it is. It's on Saginaw Street.
Yeah, it's like, what it's called, Woods or something?
Woods barbecue, and they call it Woods Fish, but they also have barbecue. They do barbecue outside in one of those little large, canisters.
Oh, those are so good. I gave half the bucket we ate, and then there's a remaining of it I gave away to a friend of mine, and he was just like, I said, we got to go. We got to go over there and get some. This stuff is just it's a great barbecue.
And make sure you get their fish too, because they have the best fish in town.
Yeah.
I don't go there as much as I should, but they have good side dishes. You want to get the dinners there too, and you'll be really impressed with it. But you're invited over today if you want to come over and have some of that barbecue. I'm going to be barbecuing after I leave the studio today, and that'll be the barbecue and the chicken, and I'll put some. I know you guys like pork, so got to do some of that. Okay, well, I just want you to be aware, before we get off the air here, that we are moving into a different zone, and we've got to do some revisiting of the space we vacated and vacated back to where we need to be, and that is under the constitutional mandates. And that is doable, but it has to be done. It has to be done pretty soon, because we're getting further and further away from that which was intended by the framers. Okay, we got to get out of here. I see I am so happy today to see the two Catherines back in the studio. I have been saying that they will be back today. Glad to see them in the studio today, and they'll be here at 3:30 with Satori's Black History Corner. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.